All right, two other key points, and then I'll introduce the first speaker. Two key ones and then three small points. One is, this really, even though as individuals we have various political persuasions, when we got down to the brass tacks of what it was about this infrastructure project called the CRC, what it was not appearing to be right as we studied it. It broke down to mechanical, pragmatic, basic things that brought us together. We could not begin to put a Democrat or Republican label on it. So we're sincere when we say this is not a partisan issue. This is just mechanical and practical, and that's what we'd like to have be relayed today. And also you'll see this is not just a bunch of folks yelling down with something. We have there's lots of ideas for how to do better for our transportation objectives in the region. We just, last number of years, for various reasons, they've not had proper view. So it's not just negative and yelling about something bad, but that seems to be the battle we have right now, is to slow down the machine that is moving, that is lumbering forward. So, but just note, there'll be references to numerous ideas that are good, and that we have we're aware of lots of other folks and very smart people who have been trying to put forth good ideas over the years.
Shortly after the Regional Transportation Summit, Mayor Pollard again publicly raised the issue of a Tri-Met extension into Vancouver. According to CRC's summary memorandum of June 8, 2007, Governors Locke and Kitzhaber established a bi-state task force of 28 community members, business representatives, and elected officials to address concerns about congestion on the I-5 corridor, especially between Washington and Oregon. Following a formation period, the CRC held numerous hearings and meetings. My question: a long list of stakeholder meetings, neighborhood PR sessions, etc. But name one citizen input or objection that was incorporated into the CRC light rail design plan.
So as I look at our wholesale department, or excuse me, our wholesale distribution, we have to look at the cost and how we get there. And every night, multiple times to and from, with the trucks crisscrossing, we're going over the bridge. So we know in its newest planned state, there's going to be a cost involved there. It doesn't sound like much, but when you start adding this thing up. Daily, our businesses works with local auto installers, and our proximity to the bridge as it is from probably our busiest store. It's right in the middle of its 5-mile radius of life, and we go up to 10 miles for deliveries. We work with local small business owners on a daily basis, and the financial impact that this is going to have on goods and services for us to offer them, for them to offer to their customers, it's an infinite line that keeps going and going and going. I have customers from Vancouver that come over to our facility at Delta Park 3, 4, 5 times a day. Now maybe they don't have to, but they want to. That is a decision as a small business owner that we enjoy today to be able to do. In the future, that option is not going to be there. As I look at this great big bridge that is going to be built, and mind you, this baby is going to be large. It doesn't feel like the Pacific Northwest to me. I don't see a bridge heading north and south. I see a very large economic equivalent of the Berlin Wall. And it's going to stop us from moving to it.
We agreed that when government spent money, it ought to spend it well. And when it was going to do a project, it ought to do the best project it could. And that the purpose of government was, in fact, whether it was a bigger role or a smaller role, it was to solve problems, not to reward power. But the final thing I'll say, what I recognize, that to me this has not been a question of policy. The problem we've had is not one of math or planning. The problem we've had is one of politics and power. Yeah. The reason the problem is happening is not because the best pointy heads are figuring out the best answer, but because the biggest muscle is pushing through an answer they've settled on and aren't willing to reconsider. And it will require more rooms like this one to make people reconsider, and I appreciate your time and being here today. Thanks very much.
What I want to talk about is we talked about that hump that's in the center of the channel, and if we we don't see very many tugs that go under that. But that channel is, that height is 72 feet tall. But if you look at the railroad bridge that is a mile downstream of the I-5, it has a it has a swing span that was built in 1908. And the reason why that was built in 1908, if you remember your history books, a lot of the boats back then were slow steamships or even sailboats. And so most of their cargo came into Vancouver at that time. So they built the lift span on this side of the river. Well, in 1917, they built the highway bridge that had rail on it at that time. They had heavy rail and also trolleys that ran across the bridge, built in 1917, but they had to have the lift span built on the Vancouver side. Well, my point is that it would be most of the tugboats operations back on the CRC. They have a page that shows an S-curve, and this S-curve is something that the small boats can negotiate, but tugs do not. And in 2004, they had 556 lifts, and all of these lifts were for tugs that were under 72 feet. They could have went under that mid-span if the bridge, the railroad bridge, would have had a swing span or a lift span in the center of the channel.
If you get a moment, I'd like to have you take a look at this graph. It's a little bit too small for the amount of people in this room. But make no mistake that light rail is an agenda. It's not a transportation solution. Think about that. It is an agenda and not a solution, and that is why this project is being proposed. In the Seattle region, which is the basis of this chart, you can see that there's passenger vehicles that account for about 85% of the transportation. That means people like us that drive in their cars. That's 85% of the people in Seattle. So the other 15% includes people that ride mass transit, they ride their bike, or they walk. Yet, 60% of the transportation dollars are being spent on mass transit. So think about that, 60% for only 3% of mass transit, or if you want to even include the bikers and the walkers, 15%.
And it boggles the mind, and I can only assume that they either don't understand the funding mechanisms of the project and what the outcome is going to be on their businesses if this is adopted, or they stand to profit somehow from it that I haven't quite figured out. Okay? And the reason I say that is because it doesn't make financial sense for this community. Okay? So let's take a look at the numbers. In the original projections, the tolling portion of the project, and these are their own numbers, by the way. None of the numbers here are fictitious. Look them up. There's been lots of financial studies done on the CRC's projections. And the lowest number was $3.3 billion over 30 years in toll revenue. That's what they're planning on, and that extrapolates into the state side, the federal side, and in the end, after 30 years, you're supposed to be able to pay for the whole project based on $3.3 billion. It's about $100 million a year. Now, if you also look at the statistics on who crosses the bridge, in the morning rush hour, 70% of the traffic are Southwest Washington residents. In the afternoon rush hour, 70% of the traffic that crosses the bridge are Southwest Washington citizens. So it's safe to say that in any calculation, you could take at least 50% of the revenue and say it's coming from Southwest Washington residents, clearly.
Yep.
So if $100 million a year is the low end, and half of that is being generated by Southwest Washington residents, that's $50 million a year on the low end. And when was the last time a government project finished up on the low end? Right? So for all you folks that are for this project, listen to what I'm saying here, especially if you own a business. This is $50 million that is supposed to what? Just appear out of thin air? $50 million from my friends, neighbors, and constituents that cross that bridge every day to go to work. $50 million that will not be spent every single year at your restaurants, at your stores, at your shops, at your theaters.
I'm a numbers guy and I'm a math guy, and I got interested in the finance plan because I couldn't make it work. It didn't tie back. I know what traffic is because that's what I do in my business, and I know what the tolls were, and I was sitting in these meetings, they were talking about taking away driveways and stuff, and I kept coming up with $5 billion. He also gave me a non-economic reading on it. He said, the entire finance plan is a fairy tale, and it's a fairy tale with a really awful ending. Every single piece of the potential sources is highly risky, unlikely, both in the amount of money that they're projecting and the timing on getting it. And I told you I'm a numbers guy, and Mark told me not to get bogged down in the numbers, but I can just tell you the federal highway money already isn't there. It's counting on an earmark, and there's no earmarks. So that's the hole, and that's why they're pushing the legislatures now to get the money. They need the money. The Federal Transit Authority money, $850 million, it's not a big pot of money. It's stretched over 10 years with a maximum of $100 million, and every year it's in question whether you're going to get that next $100 million, and we don't have the first one yet. It costs $1.7 billion to collect the tolls. The transponders, all the electronics, the administration, collection, the bad credit cards. It costs more to collect the tolls than we're trying to finance. When you build something and you can't toll it yet, you can't pay anything, so it's backloaded. It's not like your mortgage that amortizes. It's paid at the end. They can't even pay interest, so they're adding the accrued interest to the principal. Some people go to jail for that. You've got some courageous legislators in this room. We have courageous legislators in Oregon. We didn't have enough of them. It's really you have control over this. You need to support the ones who recognize this insanity, and you need to call the ones that need to be educated and stop the CRC in the Washington legislature. Thank you very much.
We worked and discussed this issue in 1998 and what we're going to do about the I-5 corridor and the congestion that we have there. And after those 4 to 5 hours, we were all in agreement that at that time, 1998, that the I-5 corridor was at near capacity in 1998. We were tasked for at that time finding a new north-south corridor. And we never did that because those people steering that around had other plans. We then learned down the road in 1996 that they already had plans put in place. I don't know why we went down there to be part of the pony show. I'm not sure. In 2002, they convinced both Oregon and Washington at the same time that the DOT, Department of Transportation, was totally amiss and need better leadership. And so they put the governors in charge at that time in preparation of this project. I go back now and we're trying to bring out of this economic slump that we're in. We're talking about jobs. We're not talking about jobs to count every day, because if we did, the number that we're going to lose from this project being done is going to be far greater than what we ever think we're going to gain by temporary workers to build the project. Just one of those businesses upriver from this bridge that's going to be affected is 300 jobs. Just one of them that requires to go underneath that bridge, that's going to be too low. That's 300 jobs, and we have 3 major companies over there that are going to be affected. We're also going to lose all the jobs that are going to be tore up downtown Vancouver for something that I think that we all identify as the crime train. So if we're looking at economics and we're looking at jobs and what's best for our community, this is not it. I think Representative Liz Pike mentioned that
It's agenda-driven. It's not because we need it. It's not because it's going to solve the congestion problem. They've admitted it by their own. You want to talk about the construction of that. After we got done sandblasting and replacing that trommel, they said that bridge is good for another 60 years, that the steel in that bridge is much thicker than what we put in the steel today. With that, thank you very much. Thank you all for coming out.
If they can get you to ask the wrong questions, they don't have to worry about the answers.
Right, good point.
The fundamental flaw with this project and the root of our traffic problems in Clark County is not because of a bridge or a lack of lanes or a lack of transit. It's due to a lack of jobs in Southwest Washington. And now after 18 years, my little guitar shop employs 4 people. We all have paid medical benefits, paid vacations, and a majority are homeowners. Now we and all the other small businesses are here at ground zero with the threat of a 6-year construction zone that will choke our customers' access and starve out many of our small businesses. I can't help but think about the domino effect of these businesses closing. What will happen to their employees' lives and the owners that possibly mortgage their home to start their dream? A lot more happens than just a vacant storefront. Our downtown has had 20 years of natural revitalized growth. And for that to be lost is why I got involved.
And I've worked hard to understand what those citizens need and what they want. And here's what they want to do. Here's what our citizens want to do. They want to go to work. They want to raise their families. They want to pay their taxes. They want to be good citizens, and they want to live in a nice community. And they expect their government to make decisions which benefit them, not hurt them. And my job is to know the difference. This project, as it's proposed, hurts them. It hurts them financially as light rail continues to develop in Vancouver, because make no illusion, this isn't a little stump into Clark College. If that comes into Clark College, it is going to snake through the neighborhoods of Vancouver, and it will degrade neighborhoods. It will degrade middle class and lower middle income and lower middle income neighborhoods to the point that people may want to leave. If you degrade neighborhoods, if you make them less livable, you hurt your schools. When your neighborhoods are less livable, your schools become less stable. I know this because I've seen how this trend works. I've seen what the implications of decision-making are over time. What we need a project for our future, our city, our citizens, and our county. Thank you.
My job today was to talk to you about the Senate and where we are with funding in the Senate, where this project stands in the Senate. So that's what I'm going to do. I can tell you that concern continues to mount in Olympia about this project. Okay, so don't clap because I don't want you to stop my flow here, all right? From the idea of the funding and the relative unknowns about the funding, relying on a source of money that there's no money in the pot, relying on the fact that our federal government will remain solvent for the next 8.5 years is a little frightening and daunting to elected officials. Just like you, we have to sit around the table up there and we have to figure out how much money we have to get done the things that we need to get done. So concerns about the funding of the project, concerns about the height and the number of jobs that will be lost when we build the bridge that is too low. Those are all things that we're thinking about. Now I respect my friends over here who want me to build this bridge because it's going to create jobs. But I will not shut down Vancouver's Boeing for short-term jobs when we have long-term jobs that are family wage jobs and union members are employed there. I will not choose between my two children when deciding who gets to stay employed and who gets to be unemployed. I do not anticipate a $450 million expenditure in the transportation budget this year. I don't see that getting written in. Consensus appears to be growing that any transportation package that is put forth to the people of this state will not include the CRC. Because people know when they see the project and when they hear about it, something's not passing the straight face test here. Yep. The last thing that I wanted to talk with you about is all of you. Whether you are for this project or whether you are against this project, you are the most important component of this project. I've had Representative Pike and I have had several town halls, and it's amazing that the amount of time the Columbia River crossing, everywhere we go, people want to talk about the Columbia River crossing. And I'm happy to listen. I listen to both sides because I think any solution is going to be driven by the people in this room regardless of your position. And that's exciting to me.
But what we have now is, then I followed on to the I-5 Trade and Transportation Partnership and a bunch of these things, so from the late 1990s through the 2000s. So I watched the process, and this process was preordained right from the word go. They knew what they wanted, and we were either locked out or were there only to basically rubber stamp a lot of what they wanted to have happen. And that was to put light rail into Vancouver, period. And now they found out, wow, if we can get all Vancouver and Clark County people paying tolls, this is a great revenue stream. Years ago, we identified that if we had widened I-205, and I sat down with, at that time was the Federal Highway Administrator for this area, James Cox. And James Cox and I and a transportation manager from Clackamas County in Oregon, and he said there's three things. That if we were to widen I-205 to its full capacity and made it the primary freight corridor, where we already have the width of the space that's needed to build it, we wouldn't need to do anything to the I-5 bridge. Period. Because there wouldn't be a justification. Like in the Oregon legislation, what they called HB 2800, in my brain, they put into it a caveat that said, oh, we can use transportation demand management. That is a code word for tolling I-205. Yep. They aren't going to give up. We just have to present alternatives and know that there are regional and wonderful alternatives. If we go along that corridor, there's 2 or 3 proposals, Third Bridge, Aorta project. These projects talk about the ability to take and go along potentially Portland Street all the way into Portland and create this new alternate corridor. If that was done, again, that would get trucks and traffic, that would have a port-to-port link. Yep. And I remember sitting there with the Port of Portland working on the Metro Transportation Plan back in 1998, when the Port of Portland came to us and said, we want a port-to-port link to get trucks off of the I-5 bridge. Wow! What happened? Nothing. But we have to let Olympia know right now, everyone, emphatically, that what we have is going to hurt jobs, people, businesses, and doesn't accomplish anything, and we need another solution, and we're ready and willing to work with the powers to be to have a solution that actually works. And I think that that's what we all want. Thank you.